What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this super special edition of MLB Live. Here on a Saturday afternoon, we are talking all kinds of strategy. Specifically, how much should you be weighing ownership in your DFS process, MLB specifically, NFL specifically, and just all DFS as a whole. Really fun show. David, how you doing, and how did we get here?
I'm doing good, man. I think I have pink eye. That's not great. It's coming over me this morning. I don't know what happened, but so we were just wanted to do like a general strategy show. Like we're going to break down today's slate and talk about the pitchers and the hitters and the stacks and the homers and all that. But then we just started having like a couple questions in Discord about our process, how our process works, because people have, I guess, understandably a tough time knowing what plays to follow, who to follow, when sometimes we're on different stacks, sometimes we're on different pitchers, whatever. And that goes for probably every guy at every site, guy or girl at every website across the board. So just talking about like a general understanding of how we do our processes will probably give subscribers a better opportunity to see which way they more fall in line, like whose process they perhaps like more or trust more, or find themselves a process to stick with. Because I find that there's a few ways to do it. Like you can either have a process of what you want to do. If you want to play low on guys, if you want to play chalk stacks, if you want to just lock a pitcher and build around it, sticking with a certain way of building throughout the season will probably lead to profits if you're doing it correctly. Or more of what I do is just be incredibly adaptable to each slate and just play the slate for what it is on the surface, because it's different every day. And that's kind of how I think about it, but we'll dig more into that if that made sense.
Yeah, I think one of the dangers with DFS is when you do go through a bit of a cold streak, the last thing you want to do is like completely obliterate your process, start trying all these new things that you don't know if they're solid or not, and you end up just chasing losses with more losses. Being patient, sticking with a strategy that you know is sound on the mathematical side of things, eventually that's going to lead to success. So whatever it is as a DFS player that is comfortable for you, that you feel strongly about, just stick with it, be patient. And that's what we're going to try and help you find on this show today, something that works for you, whether it's closer to David's strategy, whether it's closer to my strategy. And frankly, I think what you're all going to find through this conversation is that our strategies, as different as they seem on the surface, they're rooted in a lot of the same principles, and they're much more similar than they are different. So should be a really, really fun show. I've been looking forward to this for a couple weeks now. Basically, like I want to say it was maybe 2.5 weeks ago, you and I were on a show together, and we kind of got off the rails for like 5-10 minutes talking strategy, and people just ate it up. And I think, people have been excited for this ever since.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I hope it, goes somewhere. I hope people will find some of the information useful. What I'm really excited about today is trying to win a lot of money on this slate. But then along the way, is, just trying to, talk out the processes like we have. And yeah, people think we're probably pretty similar, but it's probably just because I say a lot of things that I probably shouldn't on the show. And I'm kind of dismissive of other people sometimes, but we'll figure it out. Let's do it.
So why don't we start here? My favorite quote of yours in Discord, you kind of laid out a lot of your strategy. And in talking about why you don't weigh ownership that much is this idea that you feel like you do a really good job of identifying the players who are in the best spots, and you just load up on those guys, and you're going to let the field make the mistakes. So why don't you elaborate a little bit on that thought?
So what I say a lot of the time is that I don't care about chalk. Like people will say, or like ownership and stuff like that. I always say that I don't care about ownership. I don't care about chalk because it's like literally the last thing I look at it, even if I even decide to look at it. And I feel like that's something you're not going to hear from probably anyone else in the industry. No, like, because everyone's talking points essentially on all the shows that you go and listen to, not ours as much, but they'll read you the teams, they'll read you the players. They'll tell you this stack is 25% owned without going through each individual player of how owned the guy at the front is, the guy at the back is, the guy in the middle. They'll just look at like overall chalk stacks and say, oh, I'm going to fade it, even though, they may or might not be in the best spot. I'll just fade it because too many people will be on it, but not taking into account the number of combinations that you can make off just two chalk teams. Depending on the site, DraftKings, you get much more because you have two pitchers on FanDuel. You have so many pitchers to choose from, like today, for example, you could just go over to the optimizer, pick your two teams, put them in there, pick the pitchers you like, and like raise the maximum of teams to build to, ours goes up to 300. You go to other sites, put it on 2,000, and just play the pitchers and play the two chalk stacks and see how many combinations you'll get. Today you would get 5,000 different combinations using pitchers and the same two chalk teams. So the reason I bring that up is because the likelihood of you landing on the same team as someone else, even with two chalk stacks, is very, very low. Because there's so many different ways you can do it, especially when you start mixing the pitchers in there. It's very, very low. And even if you were to, land on the same team as someone, if that team does very well, sure, you might not separate yourself from, a 1% owned Oakland stack that may or may not do anything. But you're still going to be winning money. And that's really, really all that I care about. So when I say things like, I don't care about ownership, I don't care about player percentages. I mean, I realize there's a separation aspect there, but what I care about more is identifying the guys on the roster that are going to hit the baseball and put fantasy points on my team. And also a lot of the time you'll have people that'll be like, well, I can't stack the Reds and the Braves because they're too chalky. Well, you can't stack the 1 through 4 on each team anyways. So you're going to have to get different that way. And just by not stacking the 1 through 4, which you can't do anyways, you're going to automatically make yourself different, or hell, throw in a one-off. And I guarantee you the one-off's going to be different. And that can be the guy that separates you from the rest of the field.
The NFL analytics community has a saying, running backs don't matter. And when they say this, they don't mean literally that running backs don't matter. What they mean is that the difference between a great running back and a bad running back is smaller than the difference between the same at most other positions. They mean that NFL teams around the league overvalue the position, overpay the position. And if there were a team to suddenly act as if running backs don't matter at all, that team would be operating closer to optimal than the other teams who are overvaluing them. Would you say, David, that when you say, I don't care about ownership, it's a similar effective hyperbole as running backs don't matter? And it's not necessarily that you literally don't care about it. It's just, it's a lot lower in your priority list than what it is for a lot of people, myself included.
I don't like the saying running backs don't matter. I will take umbrage with that saying with people. But no, I mean, it just pretty much means I don't look at it, because what I used to do is maybe look at it some, and then I would talk myself off of, a great play, and I wouldn't play it because it was going to be popular and they go out and score 30 FanDuel points or DraftKings points or whatever it is. So I can't identify who I think's in the best spot and just not play them because other people are. Like, I would much prefer me to play them and then other people talk themselves off of a single play because of ownership. Again, single play. There's so many combinations you can make on these different sites. To me, it just doesn't matter. And I'm not willing to fade who I think are going to score the most fantasy points. That isn't a knock on ownership. I understand that there are ways, and people who are very successful at playing just low-owned teams in very close scenarios where one team could easily outscore the other. Like, people stick to that method and they win a lot of money. They do. Look at two-gun in NFL. It also depends on contest size and buy-in and stuff like that. Either a very small contest where you get first or last, or a very big contest where you just want to be different. But there's also a lot of different ways to win slates. So I say this a lot too. Everything wins. Chalk stacks win all the time. Contrarian stacks win all the time. One-off stacks, or not stacks, one-off teams where they pick home runs and do mini stacks, it wins all the time. It all just depends on the day and how you go about building your team that day. So if you see people on Twitter saying, fade the chalk hits, they lose money. You see people tweeting, you got to play contrarian guys. Because they won that particular night. It all wins. It depends on the day. You have to look at the slate ahead of you and make the decision who you think is going to score the most fantasy points. That's just how I think about it.
I want to give a quick shout out to Adam and Kai in the live chat. Love these questions that are pouring in. We're going to get to a lot of them. They're going to fit perfectly into this conversation. So we see these questions. We're absolutely going to get to them. And anybody else, if you've got questions, drop them in the live chat on YouTube, dropping them in the MLB Discord chat, wherever you want. We will try to get to as many of these as possible, especially those that fit perfectly into the conversation. The next thing that I want to talk about is I have this impossible but important hypothetical to ask you about because it establishes some common ground between the two of us. So imagine for a moment you're in a 100-person winner-take-all NFL contest.
Winner take all. Okay.
Winner take all. And again, this is an impossible but important hypothetical here. Imagine that you know that all of the lineups that you're playing against are going to be using Travis Kelce at the tight end position. Kelce is the same price as Mark Andrews. You have Kelce projected higher than Mark Andrews. Assuming all else is close to equal and you are neither using Mahomes nor Lamar Jackson in your quarterback position, so the correlation doesn't come into play here at all, would you then use Kelce or Mark Andrews?
Well, the obvious answer to this question is you would use Mark Andrews, because I would have gotten cute with it and said if it was like the top 20% pays out, I would have probably just taken Kelce and taken the profit and move on to the next slate and just hope Mark Andrews loses, right? Because then you'd still tie for second, I guess, but in which case you would lose money. But in a winner take all contest, even if you won that and you tied with 99 other people, you would still lose money due to the rake. So the only way to profit in that scenario would be taking a 1% owned Mark Andrews.
And there's more nuance involved than just that. But the important here is what this establishes is that there is some point, no matter how extreme, some line where a player goes from being a good play to a good fade. And where we differ is only on where that line actually is. And having listened to you talk strategy for 2 years now, we've been working together, something like that. The way that I interpret a lot of your strategy is, and like when you say that you don't really care about ownership, it's this idea that what you believe is that where this line comes into play just so rarely actually gets crossed for players that you don't need to think about it. So if for Travis Kelce, for example, like you might think, okay, his efficient ownership is probably 60 to 70%. Even when he's mega chalk, he's only getting to 30 or 40 in high stakes single entries. So I don't need to think about it more than that. I can just play him. I don't have to, try and guess whether he's going to be 30 or 40%, because in either case, I think I want to play.
Yeah. I agree with all that. But also my real answer to this too, or another way to look at it was, the hypothetical you gave, what you said would never happen, wouldn't never happen. But if I'm sitting here and I'm looking at Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews, and I've done my research and I've looked at our projections, and I've decided that Travis Kelce is going to score more points price per dollar, which matters sometimes, than Mark Andrews, I would play a 50% owned Kelce, 60% owned Kelce, because I think he's going to score the most points. Let's call him 70% owned. And Mark Andrews is going to come in 30% owned. Well, if I think Travis Kelce is going to score more points, and he does, then 30% of the field is dead with Mark Andrews. So they're not going to cash. And then I can just get different at different positions. So a lot of that to me is you looking at the entire lineup as opposed to just looking at one play. But that's me getting different from the example that you gave.
I'm going to use this as a perfect time to bring up this question from Adam. He says he has a problem when hand building of being too contrarian with both pitchers and batters, and wants to know our advice on mixing chalk with others. I'll start and I'll say, I think the key here is you find the ownership efficiency, what you believe to be the largest ownership efficiency on the slate. You pound that, and then you say, okay, if I'm right about this, so let's say that you believe like the biggest edge on the slate is that the Dodgers are going to be way too contrarian. So if you're right about that 5-man Dodger stack going nuclear, the rest of your lineup should then say, if I'm right about this, I want to maximize my chances of getting a takedown in this tournament under the condition that I am right about those Dodgers. So, that might mean going to chalky pitchers. It might mean going to a chalky secondary stack that has some really good, obviously underpriced value that helps you fit those Dodgers, that sort of thing. So that's how I would answer that question. What about you, David?
A lot of things I'm thinking about here. So, say the Dodgers are the highest owned stack. What I would do is I would look and see if I agreed with the Dodgers being the highest owned stack, or if I saw someone close enough to where you wouldn't have to get to the Dodgers. But the Dodgers are an interesting example because they're so hard to stack on a nightly basis anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But not taking that into account, what I would do is look and see if I think they are in honestly the best position. And if they are, I think they are going to score the most points, I'm going to play them. And then you have to start thinking about your pitchers and thinking about your other stacks. Same goes for pitchers. I'm not going to fade a guy, I mean, that I think is going to score the most points and be in the best spot. I'll let other people do that. Let other people do that. So the way that I read the question, and it's a little different than what your strategy here. So this is another thing that we differ on is just play the guys you think are going to score the most points. Like I read this question and it's like this person might be in just a mental loop of trying to figure out ownership and how to play ownership and all this stuff. I'm more of the mindset of figuring out how to put points on the board. I don't care if other people have 4 or 5 of the same guys. I'll beat them with the other 3. I'll beat them with the pitcher. And that's enough to separate you. So I'm just going to play the guys I think score the most points. I can't waste my time because I do all my research by hand. I write everything out. I know how all the bats are lined up today. I know how all the pitchers are lined up today. I've looked at every single person on this slate stats against who they're facing. And that's what I'm going to go with. So that's what you'll get if you sign up and, read my Sweet Spot article. Out of me personally is knowing that I've dug through each and every single bat. And so doing all that work, I can't then go, all right, well, now I'm going to look at the ownership and mix everything up I've worked on for 4 hours today. So that's what and also when you build your teams, if you're not worried about ownership, I promise you, like you're not going to dupe anyone almost all of the time. You're if you think they're scoring the most points and you play them, then you can't be mad at yourself for talking yourself off of what you think are the best plays are just because someone else is playing them too. I can't think like that. And I think you'll be naturally contrarian enough in most cases that you'll score enough points. This is not how people talk about DFS. I understand that. Any show that you listen to outside of our company is not going to be saying these kind of takes, but that's how I play. I don't know. I mean, if you want to go read listen to someone, just read off and recommend every team on the slate and don't play them, or maybe you can play them or don't do that, go for it. But I don't know. That's not what I'm here to do.
So it's worth noting for those unfamiliar with David's play on DFS, this guy's one of the most successful DFS players, maybe in the world. Certainly in showdown contests for NFL, I mean, it's almost a weekly outcome where this guy's bringing home a lot of money. So I don't agree with a lot of the things that he's saying. I think mathematically, I really differ, but I certainly can't argue with the process. And what I can do is offer explanation for how somebody who seems to be going against the math in some ways has so much success. And the main way that I've been able to explain that is, I think, David, we've talked about this a lot. Like, you are very naturally contrarian.
Yeah, that's true.
And the way that I would describe that is you are looking at data that you believe is more predictive than a lot of the data that people are using. You are going deeper into the matchup, doing more work so that you are finding edges that other people aren't. And so the guys that you deem to be in the best spot on a nightly basis often aren't the teams that are the chalk. So I think that's another reason why, like, when you say you don't care about ownership, that might be different than somebody else saying they don't care about ownership, because somebody else is probably going to land on chalk far more often than you do.
Yeah, that's probably true. I would imagine a lot of people, well, I don't know. Maybe people spend a lot of time on this. Maybe people don't. Maybe people just hop in and say, look at, who's playing in Coors Field that night and just rush to play them. Although, like, that's a lot of the time a bad play as well. Even like last night, for example, I put in the Discord about playing Ohtani and Trout, and that they'd be so highly owned, they would both have to hit 2 homers to pay off and be on a winning lineup. Now, I didn't look at DraftKings, but I know that wasn't the case over on FanDuel because they were so highly priced. But it was more being highly priced than highly owned. They both hit like back-to-back homers. And I was just like, shit. I was like, that was not the right thing to say. But they didn't do it twice, and they were so expensive that you would have to.
I created this Venn diagram to help people understand, I think, where we differ.
Oh, cool.
You can see on the left, too contrarian, on the right, too chalky. So all lineups in the light blue, too chalky, all lineups in pink are too contrarian. Everything in the middle is a positive expected value lineup. I think that when I build a bad lineup, and let's be really clear here. Like every single one of us, no matter how good or bad at DFS we are, we have nights where we build bad lineups. And when I build a bad lineup, I would say it's almost always in the pink. And when you build a bad lineup, it's almost always in the blue. And so when you say like you don't care about ownership, and I think that 9 times out of 10, maybe even more than that, maybe it's like 99 times out of 100, you're going to build a lineup that is naturally contrarian. You don't have to care about ownership. You have enough differentiation. When you accidentally land on a team that is all chalk, I would say that ends up being one of the lineups in the blue. It's too chalky, and that's probably not going to be one of the nights you win. What do you think about this? You think this is on the money here?
Well, I think it depends on how many points the chalky team scores. So if they're chalk and they score the most points, I think I'll have a pretty good night. But yeah, I mean, it's baseball too, which is most of what we're talking about here. And things, things change quickly with baseball, and ownership does tend to matter more in baseball, I would say, because it's just very, very hard to predict. But I mean, yeah, sometimes I land on chalky teams and they do poorly. Sometimes I land on chalky teams, not the 1 through 4, and they do good, because you can't stack the 1 through 4 on 2 chalky teams most of the time. I made that point, unless they're just way underpriced, in which case then you can start. I mean, like if I'm looking at, like if the Reds were like $2,500, like 1 through 5 today, and they fit perfectly with like the 1 through 4 or 1 through 3 or whatever for Atlanta. I mean, I would think about that, but the way I would probably get different there is just go like make sure I land on the right pitchers or different enough. I don't know. That's not a great example.
This is another way to answer Adam's previous question, by the way. Same with Kai's. Good chalk can win, correct? Both of these, you just separated there the difference between playing chalk stacks and playing chalky players within those stacks. So one of the ways that you can find a better balance between chalk and contrarian upside, you don't necessarily have to fade the chalkiest stacks. Just find ways to stack them in a contrarian way. One of the things that we like to talk about a ton at FTN is looking to the bottom of lineups. So let's say you really like the Rangers. Maybe it's including, Ezekiel Duran, who's hitting 8th that night, and Leody Taveras hitting 9th. You make the stock a little bit cheaper. You preserve some upside because those guys are both really good hitters and have some event upside. They can steal bases, they can hit home runs, that sort of thing. So finding ways to get different within stacks is another way to do this. I want to pivot here and
let me add to that. I want to add to
go
that.
for it. Yeah, go for it.
So like the other night I had a good night, or I have 2 examples. So a lot of people, like they'll be really focused on stacking everyone in like absolute order. Like you have to have 1 through 5, 2 through 6, whatever it might be. That's not usually how MLB teams roll their lineups out. So what they typically do is try and put, a dud in between 2 good hitters, or a righty lefty, whatever. And so like the Reds were in a good spot, I don't know, a week or 2 ago, and I just like the lefty bats, and I want to say it was like 1, 5, 7, 9 or 7, 8, something like that. I just played all the lefties, and they weren't even close to each other in the lineup. But if they go out and score 14 runs, and everybody's doing something, and that's just skipping spots is almost different enough to get you there. Same with the White Sox. I want to say 2 Saturdays ago, I just picked the bats that I liked playing against the Dodgers that weren't necessarily in order, and all 4 of them hit home runs just because I had identified that those were the best bats on the team, and just being different enough there. I think I got 2nd place. And they were clearly in the best spot that day. I don't know. I actually don't think they were that chalky, but they were just clearly in the best spot. So I just played the guys that I thought were going to hit home runs. Like, I don't think it's that hard. Like, just play the guys that are going to hit home runs.
And by the way, I think it's worth noting that that is another way to well correlate lineups. Like, I think people notice the obvious and the direct correlation of like, hey, if the first guy hits a double and the second guy hits a double and the third guy hits a double, all these guys are scoring points together. The guys driving runs in are getting 2 extra points for that RBI. Guys who are scoring a run are getting 2 extra points because they were just driven in. But there's also this element of correlation that, hey, if the pitcher is really bad against lefties, or maybe specifically on that day, like the guy just can't throw his changeup, he can't locate it, he keeps missing with changeup over the middle of the plate, then lefties are going to have a really good chance that day of crushing him. So you do get this other element of correlation And so when you try to get different in that way, you're not really losing out on correlation, which I think a lot of people probably believe that you are. So I love that route as well. I want to look towards one of my recent lineups, and I believe this was on May 21st. And this was in the 5-5-5. It was, I believe, like a 93rd percentile lineup. What I want to look at here is this Dodger stack. So obviously the Dodgers were the premier stack of this day. In fact, I went back and counted this morning. 7 of the top 10 and 16 of the top 20 lineups included a Dodger stack on this given night. The reason this is so important is let's look at these ownerships. So we've got 20% on Freddie Freeman, 17 on Mookie Betts, 17 on Muncy. JD Martinez was 10%, and then Jason Hayward, who I thought was maybe going to get me a little bit more differentiation early in the day, ended up hitting 5th instead of like 7th or 8th, and because of that, he ended up getting to 11% as well. But the problem here is it was really hard for me to separate with these guys. Now, David might look at this and say, what are you complaining about? You made almost $700 on this lineup. Like, this is great. I want those takedowns. And basically my approach to each slate is I want to maximize my chance of a top 1 percentile outcome, a 99th percentile outcome, not 93rd as this one was. So obviously my secondary stack got beat like crazy. The Varsho, Bichette, and Kirk, even though the team scored 7 runs, they did very little. I had little to no chance of getting to the top. The reason I wanted to bring up this lineup is because throughout this conversation, there's a lot that I think comes down to personal preference and play style and what we are more or less comfortable with. And then there are also things that are just pure math and pure probability. And I think this is one area where ownership is extremely important to understand, and the effect of ownership. So you can think of every single lineup that you make has a potential range of outcomes for points scored, right? So it has a bell curve. This lineup that I had built, I'll bring it back up. This lineup probably had an expectation of around, 120 points, something like that. And it probably had a ceiling somewhere around or above 200, and it could have been as low as 50, something like that. Every single potential score would also then have a probability of getting a takedown. So if it scored 210 points, maybe it had a 90% chance of a takedown. If it scored 150, maybe it had a 10% chance, whatever it is. The important point here is that the more contrarian the lineup, the higher the probability of a takedown at lower numbers. So this lineup was about, this Dodger stack, I should say, was about 20% on, maybe 15% on across the board. At 180, it probably only had maybe like a 25, 30% chance of a takedown. The number's not really, the specific number, I should say, isn't really that important. If, on the other hand, all of these Dodgers were 5% or less, and this lineup scored 180, the win probability might be double that, might be triple that, because there are fewer combinations that it would have had to beat of other players, of other Dodger stacks, when these Dodgers were clearly the top stack of the night. So I do think that ownership has very real and very mathematical effectiveness and importance in these contests. And it's just a matter of understanding why it matters and how important it is to your own process. But I think mathematically, this is one area where you can't escape the importance and the real effect of ownership.
I think that's a good point on that particular night.
but what's different about that night than any other?
Well, it just, I didn't mean to just say that wasn't a good point overall. It is a good point overall. And what you're saying about the mathematical advantage is absolutely true. I understand that for sure. But it goes back to my point of everything wins. And sometimes it's low owned guys, sometimes it's high owned guys. It just really, the best way to be contrarian is probably just the builds within those teams or the pitcher that you have, or if you do a one-off. in my opinion, just everything wins. It depends on the night. But sticking with a strategy like you have, which is a great strategy, and again, a lot of people do this strategy, and not to put words in your mouth, but just trying to be a little more contrarian to get the mathematical edge is a very real advantage. I do not disagree with that. I guess my builds, I think, are just going to be, contrarian enough to get there. Or again, back to the point of I'll just let everyone else screw it up. Because if I get to, into a contest and I, for example, if I love the Braves today and they're looking like they're going to be 35% owned, well, there's still thousands of combinations you can make out of those guys. But I'll just let, 5 or 10% talk themselves out of it because they're too high owned. That gets me down to 20%, which isn't high enough to get me off of it. And if you were telling me and I was thinking about this too, like on DraftKings, if you told me I don't know, let's say Joey Votto's 100% owned today, would I fade Joey Votto on a big slate? No, I'd probably lock him in and beat everyone with the other 8 positions, because then essentially you're playing FanDuel with 2 pitchers.
Fair. How much would you say the difference in our strategy maybe comes down to the different contest types that we play? Like on any given night, I'm almost always in small single entry contests, 50-person qualifier for a big ticket, something like that. And you are either hand building multiple lineups or you're even MMEing and going for those jackpot type winnings.
Yeah, the MME stuff's a whole different show and conversation I could get into and talk about that for just days. I've been actually playing some of the, I don't typically play contests over I don't know, 600, 700, 800 people or so, because I usually play the bigger contest of the night that's I don't know, 555 or 888 or 777, whatever that is. That's typically where I live. But I don't think my strategy would change too much. It doesn't really change in NFL when I MME stuff. I've made the mistake of talking myself off my favorite plays before because too many people will play them. And I've lost a lot of money doing that back in the day. And I just simply am going to play the guys who I think score the most fantasy points. And if it's chalky, then so be it. I don't care.
Would you say, well, actually, I'll go here. I think most of the industry would probably believe that MME contests are more conducive to my style and small single entry contests are more conducive to your style.
Yeah.
I think it's the opposite. I think this is a really counterintuitive point where the way that I would, well, actually first, why don't you give your take on this? Do you think that the really contrarian approach is better in small single entries, or is it better in those MME type contests?
I think you could make a case for it either way. And I don't really have a case to make for it because I would be kind of just making it up, saying what I think people would maybe want to hear. It just goes back to my last rant. You're going to have a better answer than me. I just want the most points. I don't know how else to really say it. And I don't know, some people probably don't like to hear that, but that's really what I'm trying to do over here. So I don't really have a great answer for that. I think that you would have a higher win rate in the smaller entry stuff if you're being contrarian on a daily basis, because it's still going to be extremely hard to do the huge MME contest and win no matter how you play it. So I think that answered your question. Just the smaller stuff being contrarian, I feel would be the best way to go, but that might not be right. You probably have a better answer than I do.
Quick shout out to Harold Booker here. Says he became an FTN member and he has turned MLB into a sport that he was bad at to now one of his favorites and one that he has had a ton of success in. He's learned from us. So thanks.
It's fun when you don't play the Blue Jays. I've learned that. That's gonna suck. Or if you wanted to get contrarian, just not naturally contrarian, if you'd have played the lone Mariners the past 2 or 3 nights or whatever, you'd have a ton of money. A lot of ways.
Funny you mention that. We have a screenshot from Rotomania's lineup last night that we're going to get to shortly that includes some Mariners. But I want to answer this question first in regards to single entry versus these larger MME contests. The reason why I believe that the more contrarian style is more conducive to these smaller contests is because every single slate has an optimal lineup. The perfect combination of players that fits under the salary constraints, under the positional constraints, and just scores the most points. And then every single contest has a lineup that actually wins. So it's the lineup that finishes at the top of the contest. And in MME contests, the actual winning lineup is always a lot closer to the optimal than it is in single entries. And the more contrarian you get and the more contrarian players that hit, the larger the spread can be in the winning lineups between MME and single entry. Let's use football as an example. Say in a given week, there's a 2% owned running back who goes for 50 plus fantasy points, and the second highest scoring running back is only getting somewhere around 20. So you're creating this like a minimum of 30-point advantage just with this one player. This one player is very clearly going to be in the optimal. It's just a matter of what you can do around him. If you're in an MME contest and there are, let's say, 100,000 entries in this contest, then that means 2,000 of these lineups, something around 2,000 with the guy being 2% owned, are going to have this running back that creates such an advantage. On the flip side, if you're in a 200-person or 100-person single entry, let's use the 100-person single entry, only 2 people are going to have that guy. Only 2 people are going to have a chance to have a lineup that is even remotely close to what is optimal. In the MME contest, 2,000 are going to have that opportunity. Someone of that 2,000 is going to be pretty damn close to it. So if the 2 guys who used this 2% owned running back who scores 50 plus points in the 100% contest both used a stack that failed, guess what? No one's coming remotely close to the optimal. You're going to get this massive spread between the winners in the MME contest and the winners in the single entry contest. That's why I think you actually want to be counterintuitive, be more contrarian in those single entry contests, especially because the other aspect of this is ownership concentrates a whole lot more in these single entry contests. So if the chalkiest running back on a slate is 20% in MME, he might be 40% in these single entries. So you create more and more leverage on these smaller contests as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm glad we came to the same conclusion there. Mm-hmm. I'd also just stress too that if a 2% owned running back scores 40 points, yeah, more than likely they're going to make the optimal unless like the quarterback get hurts. But it's also going to depend too on what everyone else playing that day does, right? So like that, like if you've got the 2 spin ups also put up 40 points. And then you've got a cheap tight end at $2,100, has a day and scores 2 or 3 touchdowns. Like you could come back from it, obviously. And the people who played the 40 or the 2% on running back that dropped 40 still have to have a good lineup around it. But that's not me disagreeing with your point. It's me. I can't help but think of the entire picture as opposed to one guy, which I feel like people get stuck on sometimes. But I couldn't agree more with your take on the single entry stuff.
Cool. Let's jump to what I believe is, first of all, a really cool lineup from our guy, Rotomania.
Hey, thanks for sharing it, Jeff. Thanks for letting us in on the Mariners.
So here's his lineup from last night: Bayo and Bieber pitching, and then a Seattle stack with a San Diego secondary. These Mariners were awesome, right? Teoscar Hernandez, 26 at 5%, even lower ownership on Kelnick, on Rodriguez, on Caballero, and then Cruz was just under 10%. There's a really interesting wrinkle to this lineup, and Rotomania probably knows exactly what I'm going to talk about here because it's something that I've been harping on for years, and that is I am never a fan of the chalky secondary stack. So I'm really curious to hear what you think of this, David. The problem with a lineup like this to me is what happens when you're right about these 2 teams. So this is a question that I ask pretty much about every single aspect of every lineup that I build. What happens if I'm right? What are the consequences if I'm right? What's the payoff, et cetera, and all other effects as we'll talk about in a moment. So if you're right about Seattle, as he was, what is it that you want to have happen on the rest of the slate? Number one, you want them to separate from the other offenses, right? Especially because of how contrarian they are. The better they do relative to everybody else, the better off you are, the more likely you are to get a takedown. San Diego was obviously a really popular stack on this night. Look at Machado and Kim here, both almost 25%. So the Seattle stack is actually getting hurt by San Diego going off. And this is extended in the fact that when you only have 3 of these guys and San Diego goes off, there's a good chance you're going to get passed by the people who have 5 Padres. That's exactly what ended up happening. Bogarts did really well. Grisham did really well. Juan Soto had a huge game. So Rotomania ended up being hurt by the fact that his secondary stack went off. Now, the flip side of that argument is, okay, but if he didn't include these San Diego guys, he wouldn't have even made that much money. But you can't know what they're going to do ahead of time. All you can do is plan probabilistically for the best outcomes. I think that this lineup would have been better off with one of 2 things: either going to a different secondary stack and hoping San Diego underperforms, or making this a 5-man San Diego stack and they're just hoping you hit the right 3 Mariners. What do you think here, David?
That's the move. I mean, obviously you wanted a 5-man San Diego stack because they scored the most points. Even though they're the highest owned stack of the night, I believe, they still won all the tournaments. And then in this particular case, you would do just some Seattle guys around it, in which case the San Diego stack wouldn't have hurt you as much, but if it was Kim, Machado didn't go off. If Machado and Kim were the only ones, throwing up points, you'd have been fine, but that wasn't the case. You had Soto and Tatis going off as well. So, you just, in this case, you want the most points.
True. But that's a very hindsight is 2020 argument. The other point that I'll make here is one of conditional probability. And I understand conditional probability is not the easiest concept. I will say Chris Meany and I did a prize pick strategy video about a month or 2 ago now that went heavily into conditional probability. You can head over to our FTN Network YouTube channel. You can even just search in YouTube FTN prize pick strategy. It'll come up. And you can watch that for a good sense of conditional probability. But there's one here. There's a really important kind of aspect of conditional probability to this lineup. You mentioned, hey, if Kim Machado and Cruz were the only Padres to do really well, then this would have been perfect for Rotomania's lineup. The problem with that is the conditional probability of the other Padres having really good games when these 3 Padres have really good games is a lot higher than just their baseline probability of having a really good game. So you actually make it more likely that Soto, that Tatis, that Bogarts, all of whom did really well, Grisham as well, would have really big games, goes up when you are hoping for these 3 to hit as well. So there's that aspect to it that I think is often overlooked by people and shouldn't be. Conditional probability is an incredibly powerful concept. And the more you understand, the more you apply it to your lineups, the better off you'll be.
Go Padres.
Go Padres.
But I had the Padres plenty last night, but I had them with the Dodgers, who really, really shit the bed. Didn't love that Will Smith and Freddie Freeman.
I was bummed last night because there were 2 offenses that stood out to me in a potential primary stack. One was the Dodgers, who ended up underwhelming. One was the Padres. And the reason I liked the Padres so much was because they had 2 left-handed bats who were severely underowned in Soto and Grisham. Both of those guys hit. Like the Padres hit as a stack last night in the exact way that our ownership, our rating system was suggesting we stack them in. Nice. And I was on the Dodgers instead. So it could have been a huge night. I didn't have that huge night, but it's always fun to see the ratings come through anyway.
Yeah, I'll make the point too. The best bats were identified by the process. Like those are the bats I had too. Those are the bats you had. That's the bats our ratings ranked them in. The best bats were identified. And then if you played the best bats on in a contrarian way, I would say on that Padres lineup last night, then you scored the most points and you won the most money. So it's really kind of the same thing. I mean, the stack ranker had it. You had it. I had it pretty similar to that. The guys in the back of San Diego, obvious cheap value up there, the big bets, and Soto and Tatis. Machado, I liked a lot too, didn't get there. But, the chalky Padres won it last night, so you had to have the Padres. But that doesn't take into account the rest of the lineup and how you built as well. So there's so many different ways to do it. I can't imagine that you're going to be tying people, which probably really isn't even the argument, or that you're going to be upset if both your stacks and your pitchers go off. It's going to suck if you don't win first sometimes, but if you make money, that's really the goal. And then eventually, if you keep stacking guys that win, that get points, you'll get a takedown.
There's one aspect of what you just said that I'll push back against, or at least ask you to elaborate on.
Okay.
So the goal is to make money.
Yeah.
I agree. But I would say the goal is to make money as much as you can in the long run, not on any given night. I don't care how often I lose, as long as when I win, I make a bunch, because that's going to help me win money in the long run. And I think
Yeah.
maybe that's the greatest differentiator between our two strategies. It's you want to win more frequently. I don't care about how frequent or infrequent most of the time that I win. I care about how much I win when I win.
Yeah, I don't think those two, like the way I said that, you could come to that conclusion, I guess, but I don't think those are like mutually exclusive. Like,
I completely agree.
yeah. So like, yeah, you want
So
to win money in the long run, but like, I'm going to be a lot happier if I, double my money one night than if I lose it all.
yeah, but if the strategy that makes you double your money instead of losing it all keeps you from getting that like 100x night at some point because you're building too chalky of lineups, then in the long run you're going to make less money.
Well, we agree that the long-term goal is to make money.
I think the other like really common ground here is that we don't believe that you have to really sacrifice a lot in terms of the frequency with which you win in order to win a lot when you win at a decent rate. So the way you do that, I would argue, is you find the guys who are in the best spots who are low owned. When you can find that like holy grail of DFS, the guy who projects extremely well, or the team who projects extremely well and isn't being owned as such, that their ownership or their price does not reflect how strong of a position they're in, that's when you just kind of hammer that edge. And that's when you're in the best spot. And the more often you can find that, then the more frequently you can win while preserving that total upside in contests.
Yeah. I mean, relative to like in the way I think about it, I don't disagree with that. But and I guess this is people would think this anyways. Obviously, the chalk would have to fail, or people priced around that individual would have to do, less, put up less points than the 1% guy. Like if you have two guys at 3,000, and everyone knows this, I shouldn't even get into it. You have two guys at 3,000, one's 50% owned, one's 1% owned, and they both go out there and hit a home run. Like it's not going to separate you, but if the salaries are different and one fails, it's all relative. To me, each slate is just so different. Like you just have to determine what is going to happen on that particular day. And if it's going to be enough to separate you, sure, fine, whatever. But it all comes back to just playing the guys that you think are in the best points and trying not to control something that you can't control. Like you can't control ownership. We have a good idea about it, but you can't control it. And then if you're playing the ownership game, you just need so many other different pieces to go right. The same with if you're playing the chalk game or if you're playing any kind of game. You just have to not only identify the plays that are going to be good, but you also have to identify the plays that are going to be bad, which is probably something we could have spent more time on, but I know we got to get into the play soon. But identifying the bad plays are just as good as identifying the good plays. So if I looked at the Rockies and I think they're a terrible play and they're coming in 33%, I have no interest anyway. So it's not me saying I'm fading the chalk. It's me saying I'm not playing them because I think they're in a bad spot. So I think I just say it differently than a lot of people do, because it's just not what I just don't want to play the guys I think are in bad spots.
You mentioned controlling what we can control, and I would elaborate and say also predict that which we can predict. And I would actually make the argument that we can predict ownership at a much more accurate clip than we can predict what will actually happen on the baseball field.
That's true.
And that's one of the reasons why I lean more contrarian. Is like I don't want to try too hard to predict exactly what's going to happen, because I know that I can't. I know that baseball is extremely variant. It very well could be the most variant sport of all, most volatile sport. The range of outcomes is incredibly wide. I did, however, love the point you also made. Like, if two guys hit home runs, it doesn't matter if one is 30% and one is 1%. They got the same score. It's just important to be right about who you're not playing as it is to be right about who you are playing.
Yeah.
So that's where I think that's the point, that like if I have a weakness when playing, it's that I don't consider that fact enough. It's I fall in love with contrarian upside and my guys go off, and it doesn't matter because other offenses go off as well. And that's been something that like I know I've been really unlucky on this year, is the really low scoring slates, my contrarian offense hasn't done a damn thing. And when there are 4 offenses that all score 15 runs on a given night, my contrarian offense scored 15 runs and they just didn't separate. So many moving variables all at once. It's why we love the puzzle that is DFS and MLB DFS specifically.
I'm ready to talk about today's slate and the chalk stacks that I like. Also, I've got people asking. I've also got people. Well, not people. The editor is asking me when I'm going to turn in the sweet spot because I'm on the show right now. That thing's coming in at about 3 o'clock. The slate's at 4. We're about to talk about it all right now. It's done essentially, but I'm not submitting it yet because I still have to edit it. So it's going to be a little late today. But we're about to talk about all the plays, and then you can go read the article. You'll have an hour. You'll have access to Alex and myself to ask some questions too. So.
All right, let's jump into the slate. Do you want to start with pitchers or do you want to start with stacks?
Pitchers, stacks, home run calls, and I don't know. That's how I do it. Maybe if we see some prize picks plays we like, maybe talk about those. If we see some bets that we like, I love talking about bets these days. I've been pretty hot with those. Hit the Coors under last night by a run, so that was fun. But then I lost a little on prize picks. So let's talk about baseball.
So, all right, start us off. Who's your favorite pitcher of the day?
All right, so I got 3 up top, and I did it a little bit differently today on the sweet spot because it was asking me I put my favorite pairing on DraftKings. It's usually just 2 guys, but I think today I'm probably going to build my stacks first and just try and fit in 2 of these 3 right now. And I'm excited to talk to you about it too because I feel like you'll probably have found someone that I might not be on, so I might incorporate them as well. But these aren't in particular order. So you know what? Let's do this. Let's start with Max Scherzer and talk through him because I'm sure you have a good Scherzer take as he takes on your Phillies today. Number one, he's probably too cheap again, right? He was too cheap last time, and people were scared to play him just because he gets blown up sometimes. Like he's probably going to give up a homer or 2 today, but you want him to go out there and get his 8 or 9 strikeouts, maybe get the quality start. If he doesn't go over 3, maybe get the win, even though he's on a terrible team right now. So that all work out. So you've got the Phillies who've been terrible. They've had to face recently worse at scoring runs. So they did just have to play the Braves, which is a tough team to score runs on, unless you're Cincinnati, apparently. Like the past 3 games, they played the Mets, I guess, last night, right? Mm-hmm. So they're averaging like under 3 runs per game over their last 3, whatever. They strike out the 7th most in the league at home. But if you take on the season, but if you go and take out the teams that aren't on the slate today or not at home, that makes them the 2nd worst home strikeout team on the slate, just behind Cincinnati by like nothing, like a fraction. So basically, you could say they're the worst team at striking out at home on this slate today. Last time Scherzer faced the Phillies, struck out 9. That's good. 32 DraftKings points. That's good. You got to worry about bats like Harper, who's just kind of always had his number, like over 25 at bats, hitting him over 500 in ISO and WOBA. That's awesome. Kyle Schwarber's gotten to him to some extent. No one else really has, but this also takes into account some of the numbers from past years where Scherzer was a little bit sharper. Also this season, he's getting hit harder by righties. And the Phillies are in a place where they have to play their lefties because lefties more up top because their lefties can also hit righties and their elite names, whatever. But Scherzer's been good against lefties, better against lefties this season on his career. That's not the case, but this season, yes. The Phillies are rolling out 5 lefties. 2 of them I'm worried about. The rest I'm not. I think he can get his strikeouts again. I think he gives up a couple homers, but I also think he's too cheap. He'll be popular, but I think he's one of my top 3 guys. What do you think about Max Scherzer?
Before I get into Scherzer, I want to say real quick, as we talk about this slate, we are going to continue to mention some general strategy stuff, and we're also going to show a little bit of our actual rating system on the back end of it. So stick around if you want to see all that stuff, see what we have to offer here at FTN. You can sign up for a 3-day free trial at ftndaily.com/free. Get access to all kinds of best ball content for the NFL season coming up. And of course, all of this great MLB stuff. So thanks for sticking around. As far as Scherzer is concerned, I do think Scherzer is a strong play here today. He's 2nd in the strikeout model in projected DraftKings points at 15.7, 2nd in projected strikeouts at 6.5, and 3rd in projected strikeouts in the FTN data model at 6.2. So across the board, just strong projections there. I think you're pretty dead on about the matchup. Like the Phillies are a team that I do always hesitate to pitch against, not necessarily because they're producing a ton, but they have a lot of guys who really work counts. And I do think that some of the hitters on the team, like Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, who have struggled for a lot of the season, are starting to hit the ball a lot harder, more frequently. So there are concerning aspects to the matchup, but this is Max Scherzer. We don't see him under $9,000 very often, and he's starting to get it back together. His CSW over the last 30 days, 29%, much closer to his baseline than where he's been for most of the season. Similar trend in his batted ball data. It's actually been quite good lately, just an 87 mile per hour average exit velocity allowed in the last 30 days, 9% barrel rate, right in line with his long-term baseline, and a 39% hard hit rate. One of the first times all season that I can recall seeing it under 40% over the last 30 days. Not that 39% is a great hard hit rate against, but it's better than what it's been, which is pretty much the theme of Scherzer lately. He's been better lately than what he's been for most of the year. So I do think we're still getting a discount here at $8,900, despite the fact that I don't love the matchup. The strikeout upside is there, and that really shows up in the threshold probabilities. He's second in both the probability of getting to 25 and the probability of getting to 30 DraftKings points on the slate.
That should be enough. That should be enough. So, yeah. How many runs do you think the Phillies put up on Scherzer today?
I don't know. That's not the question. The kind of question that I really think about when I'm using
okay.
AI.
How many home runs do you think Scherzer gives up?
So I think that's a better question, because it's a little bit more relevant to like his range of outcomes that I view him having, because I think the answer is probably 2. Might be the most likely outcome. But the thing about that is, does it really matter if he gives it 2 home runs? As long as they're solo home runs, as long as, maybe one guy is on base, then as long as he's striking out guys around those homers and he's not giving up a ton of base runners other than those 2 home runs, chances are he's still going to deliver a good score. That's the power of the strikeouts, especially with the DraftKings scoring system. So I like that question more, because it shows the strength of the play, in the sense that we think he's going to give up homers, and it still might not matter. He still could very easily be one of the best values on the slate.
I'm interested now. I mean, it doesn't matter, but I'm interested now. Like, when he really loses it, I mean, he gave up 2 homers, 6 earned runs against New York recently. But I feel like when he really loses it, it's more of when he's just getting hit around, as opposed to just getting hammered for home runs all the time. Because he just doesn't. If Max Scherzer's getting hit, he just doesn't have it. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Hits home runs.
We got a question a little while ago from Adam as well, about the sample size that he takes into account for BVP. And that would be more a question for David, but I will say that's the kind of question we will answer in the Discord chat, not in the free YouTube chat, not on this show. That's for another time. So once again, head on over to FTN Daily if you want that kind of answer.
3 at bats.
David likes to troll me with BVP because I take a lot less account into B, or a lot. I care a lot less about BVP than he does. Let's get into some other pitchers here. The guy who's I should say this first of all. This is a really tough pitching slate as far as I'm concerned. Across the board, I see very little separation in projections between so many of these guys. So at $7,200 and above, excluding Osvaldo Bido, everybody is between 11.4 and 17.2 projected DraftKings points. That's an incredibly small spread of guys. There's a bit more of a spread in the projected strikeouts, which is why James Paxton is probably the guy that I would like to go to.
Yep.
His strikeout projection in the strikeout model is 7.2, 6.5 in the FTN data model. That's second best on the slate. The 7.2 is the best on the slate. And because of this strikeout upside, he's actually separating a little bit in the threshold probabilities. The probability of at least 20, at least 25, of at least 30 DraftKings points. There's much more of a separation between he and the rest of the field in those probabilities than his median projected outcome. So I do think if I can pay up for Paxton, I'd like to. But there are also like a number of guys here that just project well enough such that if I see that they're at low ownership and if they fit my lineup, I'll be happy to use them. And in that list is Jose Barrios, John Gray. I'll throw Freddie Peralta, Tanner Bibby, and Lance Lynn all in that conversation. Although we're also going to talk about Lance Lynn in terms of someone you can stack against. But yeah, what are you thinking about these other pitchers around Scherzer, around Paxton?
I mean, you named my top three in there. So you brought up, excuse me, you brought up Paxton pitching in Chicago today. You've got the wind blowing in 12 miles per hour there, which is the highest on the slate. It's not like something you 100% have to target. It's not crazy. It's not Wrigley, but it is blowing in there. Here's a stat that doesn't matter. Paxton has faced the White Sox 5 times in his career, 3.28 ERA, 27 strikeouts, and 24.2 innings. He's allowed 1 home run. Doesn't matter. That goes back to like 2014, but I looked it up, so I'm going to say it. So past couple weeks, you've got the White Sox, 6th worst team average against lefties, only 214, striking out 27% of the time. Paxton, 32.7% K rate. That's really good, especially on this slate. Doesn't give up a ton of homers. He's got a low xFIP, even though his like ground ball rate isn't spectacular or anything like that. So it's not really him getting lucky. It's him just being good. White Sox, pretty bad home park advantage just because the team's been so garbage. They don't score a lot of runs at home. One of the worst in the league. I want to say bottom 3, bottom 4, like 4.11 runs per game. Doesn't matter too much. Also not nothing. You got the wind in. Already mentioned that. Paxton, he's just been good, man. He's just been steady. He'll go out there. He'll get you 20 points. You're not terribly worried about the lineup that Chicago's rolling out. Let's see. I'm sure it's confirmed. Let's take a look at it. Benintendi, Tim Anderson, don't care. Robert and Eloy, Shore, Vaughn, Shore, Grandal, don't really care about that. Berger's back batting 7th. Frazier and Andrews, I'm not worried about it. I'm worried about Robert. I'm worried about Eloy maybe hitting a homer, but Benintendi and Anderson both aren't going to be on the base, and Elvis Andrews definitely isn't going to be on the base. So just go out there, give me my 20-25 points against one of the worst home teams in the league and the Chicago White Sox with the winds blowing in. Just keep doing your thing, James Paxton.
For those who are watching and aren't familiar with my pitching analysis, the number one thing that I like to do is look at a player's CSW trend and the type of batted ball quality that they're allowing. I think these two numbers in conjunction with each other really tell us a story of how the pitcher is throwing. So the guy that I might have the most interest today is Jose Barrios. Yep. For the last 30 days, his CSW, which by the way is called strikes plus whiffs per pitches, is up to 32.4%, almost 4 percentage points above his baseline. The thing with Barrios is that he had an uncharacteristically awful year a season ago, which is, of course, affecting a lot of his data. And now we're seeing a much, much stronger version of Barrios. At the same time, we're also seeing his batted ball data look phenomenal. His barrel rate is basically slashed in half compared to his baseline since the start of last season. His average exit velocity is down almost 3 miles per hour. His average hard hit rate is down about 10 percentage points to just 30.6% over the last 30 days. Everything that he's doing is telling us that he's commanding all of his pitches and he's producing swings and misses or fooling guys with, backdoor 2-seam sinkers, that sort of thing, creating a lot of called strikes and whiffs. I love this spot for him. I love the way he's throwing. And so then you add the matchup with an Oakland team that, of course, likes to strike out. They don't produce a ton of offense. Barrios is probably my favorite pitcher of the day, particularly because I don't think he's going to get a ton of ownership. I think there are at least 2 guys in Lynn and Scherzer who will get more.
I have him ranked 1. So we're kind of on the same guys today. You made the point about Paxton might be, you might want to pivot off him a little bit, I think is what you said, not to put words in your mouth. But yeah, I wrote him up number 1 too. Oakland, didn't target him last night. Didn't think they were in a good spot to target. I'm going to target them today. Bottom 4 against righties over the past 2 weeks after the little win streak. Super cute. They have struck out the most in the MLB against righties the past 2 weeks after the win streak. Don't ignore that. Even though Jose doesn't have like a great strikeout rate, it's 21.1%. It's probably going to be enough. The last 30 times, here's BVP. Last 30 times anyone from the lineup against Jose has played him, 0 Oakland bats have a homer. They have not walked one single time in the last 30 times that they've gone against him, and that includes the bad year that he had last year. And then we got a combined 10 hits. Jose is allowing under 1 home run per 9. Love that. Home ERA, I don't know if it's the best on the slate. It's probably one of them, 2.37 home ERA, even though he's in a park that you typically don't want to – I mean, that you can hit a lot of home runs in that park. Yeah, last 3 times he's pitched dud this season too. He followed up with 20 DK points, if that means anything to anybody. And he's got the best matchup in the league against the Oakland, Las Vegas Athletics. So, yeah, he's my top guy too. Him, Paxton, and Scherzer as far as the spend ups.
I want to talk about Lance Lynn, but I have a feeling we're going to talk about him in stack section. So why don't we jump over to stacks? Who's your top stack of the day?
Let me ask you a couple questions though. I have a couple more little pitching questions.
Okay.
A couple guys up top too. I'm looking at here, John Gray and Bryce Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Gray had the dud game last time, and he's facing a Yankees team that's been really, really bad, obviously. Surprisingly, not striking out a lot, though. And I feel like you're going to want those strikeouts. Now, they could go out there as the Yankees. They could go out there and strike out 10 times. But I'm a little worried about the lack of strikeouts they've had lately, even though they haven't been scoring any runs. A little worried about that. And then I think Miller is a little bit sneaky going up against Baltimore, who haven't been doing much. But I'd probably prefer if he was at home. Any interest in those two guys?
I've got some interest in John Gray for sure. You mentioned the fact that the Yankees just haven't been very good at all since they lost Judge. Gray's CSW up to 30.6% over the last 30 days. That's well above his baseline. He's also doing a really good job of controlling the quality of contact that he allows, which I can't say either of those things about Bryce Miller. Miller's CSW over the last 30 days, just 23.1%. That's extremely low. His batted ball data is just as troubling, 91 mile per hour average exit velocity allowed, 11% barrel rate, and a 48% hard hit rate allowed over the last 30 days. He's way too dependent on just 2 pitches. We saw him have a lot of success early on. I think he has a bit of a deceptive fastball. But the more familiar that guys get, the more tape they're able to see of him, I think the more he's going to struggle relying on just 2 pitches and relying on deception. There's not a whole lot that he brings to the table. I think we're going to continue to see him struggle until he can kind of make the adjustment back to the adjustment that MLB hitters have made against him.
Okay. Like that explanation. The only other 2 guys, like we had a question about Beto of the Pirates in Discord. And then the only other 2 guys down towards the bottom I would consider would maybe be Chirinos just because of the price and the matchup. I mean, in Tampa, he hadn't been great, but 6-6 is okay. And then if Sanchez, I thought Sanchez was going to go out there and get 90 pitches for Philly, I would definitely play him. But I don't think that's going to be the case. He only got 61 pitches the last time out, coming back from injury, so we might have to wait a little while for him.
And he did pitch really well, 38% CSW, but that's just a 4-inning sample size, and the Mets are a much better offense. They're at least a tougher offense to strike out. So I'm with you. I'm not really interested there. This doesn't seem like a slate to pay down for me. I think this is a slate where my decisions are probably going to be between Paxton and Scherzer for my SP2 with Jose Barrios as my SP1.
If you pay down, that means you're hoping at least that all of these guys except for one fail. Paxton, Kelly, Jose, Gray, Miller, Peralta, Scherzer. Yeah. You need all of them to fail except for one. Or your guy to go out and drop 30, obviously.
Yeah. All right. Stacks. Who's your number 1?
It's probably going to be the Braves today, man. Like, can't lie. I think the Braves and Reds are going to shoot out again. It's going to be super hot there again. It's a great hitter's park. It's 87 degrees out there. We know the Reds are on their win streak, put up 11 last night. Braves put up 10. The Braves are the best offense in MLB, especially the last month, the entire season, really. It's gonna have to be the Braves, man. Ashcraft's coming back from the IL. He's been really, really dreadful. Although not giving up like a ton of home runs, which would be true, 1.25 home runs per 9 with a 47.8% ground ball rate. He's still just getting hit. He's walking guys, and he has to face the Braves. So on the season, he's got a 6.79 ERA. Okay. Well, at home, he's got an 8.63 ERA, so that's worse. In June, he has a 17.55 ERA, and he's got 2 starts, and he's gotten his brains beat out and got knocked out, both of them. So, yeah, it's a small sample size as far as innings go, but that's 2 starts. His last 2 starts, 17.55 ERA. The Braves, so good in June. So not a real small sample size, I guess. Best team average against righties, 314. That's a lot better than everybody else, even the second best team. They lead in homers against righties in June. They lead in singles against righties in June. They lead in RBIs. They lead in runs. They're top 6 in walks. The Braves want to break the win streak for sure. They're going to put runs on the board, like no doubt about it. So yeah, Ashcraft, low K percentage, 16.8%, high walk rate, 10.1%. There's better home run matchups on the board for other teams. I'll give you that. But the Reds also had to use 7 pitchers yesterday. So I don't know how great the bullpen's going to be, how tired those guys are, who's even going to get in. They wanted to win last night more, sold out crowd in Cincinnati, and they did. Congratulations to them. But it's going to end today, even though they're going to put up runs. Atlanta Braves are my top stack. And you know what? I keep noticing the catcher on the Braves stacks is like always under owned, and he always hits a homer or two. I think pretty much any of these guys are viable, and I hate saying that, but it's the Atlanta Braves, and it honestly, it is the case. So if you want to get different, I guess you could go to the Backett stack, although that's not going to be different because people are onto it now. I think the middle would probably be like the most different way to go, just from judging from like how I've seen people playing the Braves recently, because everyone knows you can go play Harris. Everyone knows you can go play Arcia at the back of the lineup. So let's take a look. I know how they rolled it out. Just want to make sure. They moved Ozuna up to 5 today. I like that a pretty fair amount. And they've got Travis d'Arnaud behind him, followed by Eddie Rosario and Arcia and Harris. So that's really what I like, the Ozuna down. Obviously, Acuna should have a great game. Albies, great spot. Fine. He's second base, not a ton of second baseman. He always gains ownership. Austin Riley should probably be hitting behind Michael Harris at this point. But I don't know. People will be on him because he's in the top 4. Same with Matt Olson. Yeah. Anyone on the Braves is good. They're going to put up runs. So stack them how you can stack them. Find the other team you like, put that stack in, and then put some Braves around it. That's probably what I would say. I'm
so glad you went to the Braves because they are a perfect illustration of the differences in our process. And I'm going to bring up our model here, our rating system. And first thing I should note is that this is from an ownership update around noon. So we do have some unupdated lineups in here and some unupdated ownership. I'm going to get to that once we are off this stream, but a lot of this stuff will still apply. The first thing is I've sorted by our DK value metric here, and you can see Brave at the top. These Braves are projecting extremely well. We certainly agree there. However, if we look at the rating system, and I'm just going to bring up all of Atlanta here, you can see that they don't rate particularly well because a lot of the field is on them. The ownership on these guys pretty high. Ronald Acuna Jr. might be in a quarter of MME lineups, and he might be like 40 to 50% in some smaller single entry contests.
That means 75% of the other lineups are going to be dead. That's how I would think about it.
Maybe. It certainly could be. It 100% could be. Now, what I want to make clear here is I am not opposed to a Brave stack. These low ratings don't mean to me that I can't play them under any circumstance. What they mean is they're not going to be where I find the greatest edge on the slate. And this gets back to how you and I build lineups differently. You seem to start with the place that you believe is the highest probability of success. I look for the highest ownership and efficiency. If, for example, Jose Barrios, who I feel really strongly about, was projected for under 5% ownership today, I might say, okay, Barrios is the ownership and efficiency that I want to take advantage of. Mm-hmm. So all I'm then asking of my primary stack is score me a lot of points, support that advantage that I'm getting from Barrios.
Yep.
Instead, because Barrios is going to get some ownership and whichever other pitcher I'm going to, Paxton, Scherzer, whoever, is also going to get some ownership, I want to ask my primary stack to win me the slate, to separate from everybody else. The Braves are not going to be able to do that because of their ownership, so I am likely looking elsewhere for my top stack. And quite frankly, I haven't figured it out yet, but we can look through these ratings together and maybe we will find who I'm on. So as I look for that, as we all look for that,
okay,
who would be another stack that you look to, David?
So in the sweet spot as of now, I'm gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stacks, 2 that I wrote up, and then some others to consider. Now I mentioned that the Braves aren't in the best home run spot technically, but they also hit a ton of home runs, so I kind of cancel that out. Still like I'm not talking anyone out of them here. The next full team that I wrote up that I think I have tied at 2 with a couple other teams is going to be Tampa Bay. So we've got Jordan Lyles. It's going to be a great person to target in Tampa Bay, even though it's not like it's more of a pitcher's park than hitter's park, I guess you would say. But he allows the third highest run rate on the slate, 1.89 home runs per 9. I look at home run rates a lot. I want my players to hit home runs. Like, what you want. So he's behind Lance Lynn as far as home run rate on the slate. Lance Lynn has a 1.92 home run per 9, and Luis Severino has a 2.40 home run per 9. We'll talk about that a little bit more too. Like, he's getting beat up. But Lyles, the ground ball rate contributes to it. He doesn't strike out a lot of guys. The walk rate's fine, 7.9%. Away from home this season, 8.35 ERA, really bad. He's not at home today. He's got the highest XFIP of his career, 5.41. Lefties are hitting him slightly more power. Righties still hit him fine. It's anyone's good. And I think this is a situation where I would probably be naturally contrarian, because the bats that I like are the bats really at the back of the lineup here. Like, we know that Arozarena, good spot. We know that Diaz, good spot. Let me go and take a look and make sure they didn't switch anything up on me. So they've got Diaz, Franco, Rayleigh, who I like a lot. I thought he was going to be batting second. Like him a lot. Arozarena, Josh Lowe, like him a lot. Taylor Walls, like him a lot. Switch hitter, Jose Siri, like him a lot. And Francisco Mejia, I actually like him a lot too. So even if the Tampa Bay stack starts to gain some ownership, I think the back of the lineup is where you get different. That's probably who I want to play anyway, and that's who I can get into a stack with the Braves. So Luke Rayleigh is going to be my favorite bat. Last 159 at bats. He's got the highest ISO on the team, batting third. Jose Siri, second highest ISO on the team against righties in his last 112 at bats, 286, 9 homers. Parades, I don't think he's in, is he? I would have liked to seen him in. Like him, but he's not going to be in the lineup. Josh Lowe, good BVP against Lyles. He's also got a high ISO against righties. These are guys that you can get in the back of the lineup. Like, Mejia is fine. Walls is fine. Walls has 5 homers off righties so far this season. And then let me take a look, just because I brought it up, if there is any BVP that we do like here. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Mejia, 4 of 7 against him with a homer. Josh Lowe hitting him 500, 8 at bats. Taylor Walls, nothing special. Rosarina, 2 homers, 10 at bats, whatever. I mean, it's not a high sample size, but I think if you want to get different, go to Tampa Bay, because if I think they're going to score a lot of runs on Lyles, which I do, then the guys in the back are just as likely to do it, really.
One of the teams that I definitely have interest in is Boston. So we can take a look here. The first thing I'll say about Boston is this is about attacking Lance Lynn, and specifically, it's about attacking a chalky Lance Lynn. So one of my favorite concepts is correlated leverage. It's the kind of centerpiece to my NFL article. And basically what correlated leverage means is that you're creating leverage in such a way that the chalk you're pivoting away from is inversely correlated to the contrarian options that you're pivoting to. So in this instance, the worse Lance Lynn does, obviously the better Boston does. And so if you're right about this Boston stack, not only are you right about a contrarian stack, but it also means that 30%, 40%, however many lineups that are using Lance Lynn are dead. That's a really powerful tool. So we can take a look at these Boston ratings. They're not that high, but you can see these ownership numbers certainly are low enough that this team can help you win a GPP, especially when you add in that correlated leverage that is, of course, not factored into the DraftKings ratings. I like the fact that there are multiple ways that we can build out this stack. You can make it quite cheap with Turner, Arroyo, Casas, 3,800, 2,900, 2,800 as a secondary stack. You can bring in Devers and Yoshida and Adam Duvall. Look at these home run probabilities, 23% for Duvall, 24% for Devers. Make it more expensive, but also if Lance Lynn is getting crushed, these are probably the top 2 guys, maybe 2 of the top 3 guys who are the most likely to be doing the damage. So it certainly would make sense to include them. Devers, I certainly don't like the 27th percentile rating, but it's only 6%, so we can handle that. I do think like this is a fair rating for him because at $5,800, he's really, really expensive. And I do want to pay up a pitcher today, so it might be tough to get him, which is why I kind of like the idea of this really cheap secondary stack. But lots of ways you can stack them. I mentioned earlier, too, I think that Bryce Miller is going to continue to struggle. So it was eye-opening to me to see just how well these Orioles are projecting. Based on the 0% ownership, I'm guessing Mullins is not in the lineup. Anyone can check me on that. But O'Hearn, Santander, Hicks, Hayes, Urias, all of these guys rating really, really well, low ownership, betting on Miller to continue to struggle. So I like Baltimore quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I looked at that. I didn't write Baltimore up. I bet they would have been my 6th stack, though. I looked at it, and I couldn't make it my top one. But I you're talking me into it more. Like, yeah, I'm with you that'd be a sneaky good way to go if you're doing some GPP teams or single entry stuff. If you just have conviction there, like I don't think that's a bad play. You were talking about Boston before that. I've got them in my top 5. You want the lefties. That's what I would do. Is play the lefties against Lance Lynn. This guy gets
that's probably true.
Yeah, I mean, a Lance Lynn against lefties, 659 slug, 455 WOBA compared to righties, 339, 285. He's given up 13 homers to lefties and 57 hits in his last 36 innings. Jesus. Righties are – what's up?
I will say here there's a danger of double counting here. So in these projections, those splits are all being accounted for in the most predictive way possible over a large sample, I should say. So what you don't want to say is, okay, look, Tristan Casas is projected for 7.3 DraftKings points. He's got a 17% chance of a home run, and Lance Lynn is terrible against lefties. Those aren't two separate things. They are one thing that you're now counting twice. So I agree with you. Lefties are definitely in the better spot, but I'd also say I'd hesitate to just say, let's use lefties against him, because all of our projections, all of these ratings are already accounting for those splits in a predictive way.
Yeah, that it's baked into our ratings, but I don't know. Lefties hit him twice as good, so I'm just going to go play the lefties and hope that they continue the trend. I mean, that's what I did with. I brought it up. That's what I did with the White Sox. That's what I did with the Reds recently. It's someone that hits lefties. Just go play the guys that hit lefties. But yeah, they're baked into our projections, and it doesn't mean righties can't hit them. I mean, they can. I mean, 5 homers on the season, but lefties just do it better. So I'll just take that advantage and play the lefties if I am playing Boston. Now, that doesn't mean if I have one spot left over that I'm not going to play a righty there. But what I would not do this is go play 4. I would not make the majority of my Boston stack righties. Yeah. Matter of fact, I'd probably make sure I got all lefties if I could. But I do like Boston. I think they're a little bit lower on than they should. You do have the wind blowing in there too. You know, we talked about that earlier. So that's something. Boston can be bad at times, but I like the Boston call, and I do like the Baltimore call a pretty fair amount.
To your point about those lefties on Boston, we at least have such a large sample on Lance Lynn. Like his splits have been pretty severe throughout so much of his career that those splits might mean more for him than they do for every other pitcher. So maybe the projections are underrating how important those splits are for him, which would be a reason to just lean into those lefties anyway. Another stack that I want to touch on is Texas. You mentioned them. Yep. Severino's been super attackable. Texas really not popping in the ratings at all. This is a spot that I'm willing to deviate from the ratings, though, because Severino's form is absolutely atrocious right now. His CSW, his baseline 28% is a little bit lower than you would expect for somebody with the kind of stuff and velocity that he has. But over the last 30 days, it's down to 24.5%. And this is not a small sample. He's thrown over 25 innings in this time. That's a really, really low CSW, especially for somebody who's so dependent on missing bats. And why do I say he's so dependent on missing bats? Because his batted ball data is really bad. In this time, 91 mile per hour average exit velocity allowed, a 14% barrel rate allowed, and a 51% hard hit rate allowed. Really, really bad combination when you are facing one of the better offenses in baseball. So I think Texas has a ton of upside on this slate, and I'm more than happy to deviate from the ratings in supporting them tonight.
Which bats do you like? Because I've got them in my top 5 too.
It's tough to say. So this is another point that I've made a couple times. When you're trying to attack a pitcher because he's struggling like this, what this trend, the story that his CSW and batted ball data, I think, is telling us is that he's struggling with command and making a ton of mistakes. And when you're trying to pick on a pitcher making a ton of mistakes, how good the hitter is becomes a little bit less important because you can't predict to whom Severino is going to make the mistakes against. Like the best hitter on this team is obviously Corey Seager. But if Severino executes his pitches against Seager and then makes a mistake to Ezekiel Duran is the one who's more likely to do damage there. So I think the way that I would approach this stack is more about finding who else you're stacking, finding who you're pitching, and just using the Texas bats that fit. And this is something like you and I have talked about behind the scenes. I would like to hone in on very specific bats more than I do, but when I don't, it's not because I'm like afraid to pick. It's because my own process is leading me to say there's not really a way to separate the outlook for Adolis Garcia versus Nathaniel Lowe versus Corey Seager versus Josh Young, et cetera tonight. I have a better chance of finding, priority bats on a different stack or priority pitchers than I do the bats within the stack. I'd be happy with any combination of either 3 or 5 of these Rangers.
Yeah, I like the back of that lineup too. I totally agree with that point. That's a great point that maybe I haven't considered enough about, like, when they're just bad, it doesn't really matter who's going to be up there against him if he's making mistakes, I should say. But like the back of that lineup's good with me. Hey, we got the Baltimore lineup. You're going to like this. Maybe not.
Does that mean Jorge Mateo's in it?
No, he's not in it, unfortunately. Seti Mullins batting lead today.
Nice. He is in there.
Yeah. Rutschman, Santander, O'Hearn, Hayes, Gunnar, Hicks, Urias, Frazier.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yep.
You were asking about Mullins, I think. I mean, those are the teams that I should hammer home a little bit more too, that I do like the Reds today as well. I didn't do
I agree with that.
Yeah, I didn't do a big write-up on them. Like, they're not in as good of a spot. It's kind of hard to say because you've got a newish pitcher for the Braves who's been pretty good overall. But I'm not really – like, it's not like they're facing some shutdown pitcher by any means at all. Like, that would – I shouldn't even have said it like that. But they're going to put up runs. Like, Newman batting lead against a lefty, that's good. De La Cruz worse against lefties. You probably – don't have to have him in most expensive bat, worse against lefties, even though he hit for the cycle last night. This is exactly what happened last time when I had a good red stack. I played like Newman, Steer, Senzel, even though he's probably going to get pulled in Joey Votto. I'm pretty sure that's exactly what I did, and I caught like 3 home runs out of them. So Reds are in a good spot. 12 over under for that game. Probably goes over. I think it's going to be a shootout. Feel free to stack them both up if they are chalky. Feel free to do it. Go again, use the example, go into the FTN optimizer, put the 2 teams in, put the pitchers are in, set it to 300, see how many combinations you can get. You can get a whole hell of a lot. So just play the guys you like the most today, and I think that's going to be probably good enough. Like, if the Reds and Braves shoot out for another, 21 runs, you're probably going to wish you had it. So that's just me hammering, home the point of that I just don't care about the ownership.
HP Cards chimed into chat with, all this show is missing is Luis Castillo pitching for Seattle, so we could hear.
I've avoided some names that I didn't know how to say.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so.
For those who don't know.
I got one. Let's try one.
Go for it.
Where's he at? It's one of the Oakland guys. So we have not brought up Toronto today. Shintaro Fujinami is opening for Oakland. I feel like that wasn't too far off. Followed by Hogan Harris.
Pretty sure that was correct. Yeah. God. Can you give us a Castillo pronunciation?
It's Castillo.
No, it's not.
You focus on the I, but you add another.
That's great. One last thing I want to say that's a little bit relevant, and I actually meant to say this earlier. To your point is a really good one, that there are so many different combinations of stacks that even if you're on the same 2 offenses and same 2 pitchers as others, there's a good chance that you're going to be unique. It's not just about avoiding dupes. Like, dupes are, of course, bad. They sink your expected value if you are dramatically lowering the maximum amount that you can win on a given slate. But it's also about creating more paths to success. So if you have a lineup that, let's say, for example, that you have stacked the last game on a given night, and it's in the 7th inning. You've got all 5 of the guys. You are in 9th place of a contest, and you're 15 points out of first place. And let's say it's the Dodgers, and that you have both Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman. They come up to start the inning. Mookie singles, Freddie Freeman homers. That's 21 DraftKings points. But you were only 15 points back. Are you now in first place? Are you still in 9th place? The answer is it depends on how many of the other guys at the top have those 2 guys. If the Dodgers have already been the stack to own on this slate, and Mookie and Freddie Freeman are both really popular, chances are with this outcome, you went from 9th to 8th or 7th, something like that. And if they're really, really contrarian, then you're now in first place. So it's not just about avoiding dupes. It's also about giving yourself as many avenues as possible to climb the leaderboard in ways that the people around you are not. You ready for home run call?
Yeah.
I got my home run calls.
I was trying to make sure my Sharpie works. Again, Sweet Spot article is going to come out. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Like, I don't think we differed on much today. I don't think, as far as like pitchers.
We really didn't.
Like, we're pretty close on pitchers. Like, I'll just review my top stacks again, and you can, tell me, if you're on these guys or not. The Braves, the Rays, the Reds, the Rangers, and Boston. Those are my top 5.
I will have Boston and Baltimore and Texas as my top 3. I agree that the Braves are in a phenomenal spot. The only way I'm going to get to the Braves is if I can find some serious contrarian upside elsewhere. Maybe it's that really cheap secondary stack of Boston instead of some of the more popular or some of the better Red Sox hitters, but. So Atlanta is somebody to me that I'm probably not going to get to, even though I think they're in a great spot, which I know you view as a mistake. I think it's giving myself the best chance of a takedown.
You're not on Tampa Bay at all?
I'm a little bit on Tampa Bay. In fact, let me look at their ratings. I haven't looked at them probably as much as I should. Let's see, I'll bring this up for everybody. You know what? I'm really on Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay might be my favorite stack. So This is a perfect example of you and I using very different processes and landing on a lot of the same stuff. This is why I say you're naturally contrarian too, because you view Tampa Bay as one of the best spots. The field does not. Look how low these ownerships are. And because of that, they're all they're all projecting really well in terms of their value. And consequently, 99, 97, 97, 96. Like this looks like a phenomenal stack. In fact, I probably have to amend my rankings and say Tampa Bay, probably my number 1 with Boston, Baltimore, and Texas as the most likely secondary stack.
Let's go. Tampa Bay, TB. Ready for it. Home run time. Then
you want to start us off?
Yeah, pull that screen down.
I
thought we froze there for a second. All right. Home run calls. So I'll start it off with I'm going with Marcell Ozuna. Moved up to batting 5th against Ashcraft for the bullpen, which I said had been through it last night. 7 arms for the Reds pitch last night. I like Ozuna moving up. I think Darno behind him is good. Can at least knock him in, although Ozuna is pretty much home run or bust. I think he gets there today. Hot day. Cincinnati.
I want to check something real quick.
The pronunciation?
Yes. Okay. Listen, you're a Braves fan.
Yeah, that's how you
should be getting Ozuna's last name correctly.
So the thing, I'm from Alabama as well, and I'm also I say him how I say him, Ozuna. That's not bad. Ozuna is not bad.
Shouldn't you be looking for correct when pronunciating a last name?
All right, you say it, I'll say it.
Ozuna. It's not nya, it's na.
Okay. All right, you got me. Hands up. You got me. But Azunia. I say him how I say him, and that's how I'm going to say him. That's my thing, Alex. To over pronunciate. Azunia.
Listen, I hear Bickle all the time instead of Blickle.
Yeah.
So I notice when people are mispronouncing last names.
Azunia from the Braves. Let's pull the clip. Let's see how he says it. All right, let's see.
You don't really need to check this one. Like, there'd be a little squiggle over the end if it was Azunia.
Well, I want the clip too. When he says it to the cop when he gets pulled over, he hands him his MLB card instead of his driver's license.
That's funny.
Says, "I'll do it later. I'll do it later." Azunia from the Braves, home run.
I like the call, but I feel like if there's such thing as like putting bad energy into the universe, mispronouncing the last name of the guy that you want to hit a home run for you seems like a good way to make him go 0 for 4.
He doesn't live too far from here, by the way. One of my best friends lives like 3 doors down from him.
That's funny. That's great. Let's see. Well, if I'm on Tampa Bay, I may as well go with the guy on the Rays with the highest home run probability in our model. Luke Raley is at 26%, so that is where I will start.
Yeah, he was going to be one of mine too. I'll give you Raley there. Since we're on Tampa Bay, I'll stick with him. I told you I like the back of that lineup. I think I'm going to – this is a weird one. I'm going with a weird one. But I'm going to do it because I'm going to play him most likely. I think Jose Siri's in a pretty good spot today. Not a guy I typically like to play. Didn't like him that much when he was on Houston. Don't really love him this year, but pretty good numbers against the righty as far as isolated power goes. No one's going to play him. Price is a little high. I'll take Siri as a weird one-off for Tampa Bay.
I like this call. And the thing about Siri is I think he's such a good GPP play because when he hits in such an event upside type of way. It's, doubles, triples, homers, stolen bases, and not 3 hits that were all singles type of way. So Siri is somebody that I end up playing a lot in DFS, and he fails more often than not. But when he hits, he's almost always like one of the guys that is going to help you win a GPP. So I like this call a lot. My next one's going to be Rafael Devers. We talked about lefties against Lance Lynn. I know the wind is blowing in, but that's why it's also helpful to go to a guy who's so powerful that when he connects, it doesn't really matter if there's some wind in, it'll still make it over the fence.
Love it. I also like Jarren Duran a lot there. I'll put him on the list. Jarren Duran batting lead, lefty against Lance Lynn. Just lefties against Lynn. He's going to give up a couple to lefties, probably to Duran and Devers. You got a couple more? Any more?
Yeah, I'm looking. So I'm going to go Corey Seager. I just think if I mentioned, if Severino makes a mistake, it's not really going to matter to whom he makes the mistake. It's just whoever it is going to have a good chance to hit it. But certainly I would say Seager is the guy who is most likely to connect if he does see a mistake. We've got him at a 21% chance of a home run. I think that's probably a bit of an underestimate. I would probably put him closer to 30%, given how many mistakes Severino has been making.
Yeah, I'm going to have to take a Ranger as well. I've got 2 more. I've got to go with is it the same last name? Another Duran. I didn't know if it was an E or not. I'm going with Duran from the Rangers, batting 8th today, off of Severino. Think that's a sneaky way to do it on the Texas stack. So Ezekiel Duran, hungry like the wolf, I believe, is the reference
I like it.
I was looking for.
Yeah. All right. I think that'll do it for us.
I got one. Nope.
Huh? Oh, you got more.
Yeah. So I'm also going with Newman of the Reds is my other one. So we've got Raley, Devers, Seager, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But Alex, come on, buddy. You know what we're doing now. We are not closing the show.
Hold on. Kevin Newman. What do we have? We've got Newman at 8% for a home run.
Is that good?
That would be a hell of a call.
Lefty batting lead did it last time, I believe. Yeah, I'm going with Newman. All right, you know what we're doing here. Come on, it's time.
Newman's a righty, by the way. Did you just mean because he's facing a lefty?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. Thank you. Clarification. All right, everyone new to the show. This is where we review the home run calls. Let's see those doms. Ozuna from the Braves. Going deep, batting fifth. Ozuna, that's how it's pronounced. Rayleigh, really love the call from Alex Blickle. Their third batter for Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is going off. Hey, Siri, show me a home run. Show me a dom. Siri from Tampa Bay. Going deep, back to lineup. Rafael Devers, lefty, upland, easy stuff. Newman off a lefty. Going with him too for the Reds. Going to shoot out. It's going to be 13-9. The Atlanta Braves beat the Reds today. Corey Seager for the Texas Rangers. Then Duran at the back. Hungry like the wolf. Bad paper throw today. Jokes were in and out there. Could have done better.
That's all right.
Could have done better with the Siri joke.
Like
all right, wrap it up.
Right. Hey, thanks for everybody for tuning in. Hopefully you found this really useful. And remember, you're going to hear a lot of both David and I in the NFL season. So if you like this analysis, make sure you're signing up and getting our analysis throughout the NFL season. We can't wait for the start of that. 75 days away, the start of the regular season. Can you believe how short that is?
That's coming up.
Yeah.
I cannot believe it.
Yeah, check out all of the basketball stuff, FTN Fantasy and FTN Daily. It is available both places, and we will catch you next time.